Conducting what it calls a massive investigation.
The state is responding to a viral video alleging more fraud in Minnesota, this time daycare fraud.
At a Somali-run child care center sharing this surveillance video.
The story begins with a shocking look at how taxpayer money meant for social services is allegedly being stolen through fraudulent daycare and healthcare operations in Ohio and Minnesota. These schemes exploit the system's weaknesses, allowing scammers to claim millions of dollars for services that never happened. The investigation by federal authorities, under directives from the Trump administration, is uncovering the depth of the fraud and its connection to international money flows. Beyond theft, these operations affect local communities, distort economies, and erode trust in public programs. While some of the narrative focuses on immigrant-run businesses, the broader issue is systemic vulnerability, cultural and political sensitivities, and the urgent need for accountability to protect taxpayers and legitimate social services. The viral daycare fraud allegations. The viral videos highlighting alleged daycare fraud in Minnesota captured the public's attention because they exposed empty childcare centers claiming millions in taxpayer funding. These ghost daycare centers.
Now to the growing investigation into a fraud scheme involving taxpayer money that was supposed to be spent on social services.
Centers reportedly bill the government for children who never attended, meals never served, and staff never present. The visual impact of seeing abandoned facilities juxtaposed with claims of full operations creates a sense of shock and betrayal. Taxpayers watching these reports naturally feel anger and concern because funds intended for vulnerable children are allegedly being diverted. Beyond the immediate outrage, the videos underscore systemic problems in how states verify attendance, service delivery, and eligibility for public funds. They also raise questions about accountability, oversight, and the mechanisms used to prevent abuse. Importantly, the discussion is not about vilifying communities, but about identifying gaps in the system that can be exploited. The virality of these videos amplifies public scrutiny, putting pressure on government agencies to act and prompting dialogue about reform. In essence, this story sheds light on how gaps in oversight, combined with opportunistic behavior, can result in the misuse of essential resources meant to protect society's most vulnerable. Contradictions in Columbus neighborhoods. In certain Columbus neighborhoods, stark contrasts between impoverished areas and ostentatious displays of wealth are striking. While strip malls sit boarded up and streets show signs of neglect, luxury cars like Lamborghinis and Bentleys parked outside supposedly community-serving businesses signal a mismatch between visible prosperity and claimed service delivery. Residents notice the emptiness of these centers. No children, no staff, no activity, which heightens suspicions of fraud. Such disparities visually illustrate how scams can destabilize communities and skew perceptions of success. Beyond appearances, these fraudulent operations reportedly distort local economies, artificially inflating property values, increasing rents, and shifting neighborhood dynamics. Crime may rise as rival factions compete for control of lucrative operations, creating social strain. For residents trying to live legitimate lives in these areas, seeing unearned wealth flaunted is frustrating and demoralizing. It also erodes trust in public programs when taxpayers' money seems to vanish without tangible benefits. These contradictions make the broader problem visible. Fraudulent schemes can quietly drain public funds while leaving communities grappling with economic imbalance and social tension. Operation Buckeye and Minnesota Connections. Operation Buckeye, the federal investigation into Ohio, reportedly mirrors a $250 million fraud scandal in Minnesota, demonstrating a disturbing pattern of replicated schemes across state lines. Authorities suggest that these operations are not random. Instead, they follow an organized blueprint showing coordination and adaptability. Locals describe this as an invasion, reflecting both visible economic effects and the perceived cultural impact of rapid demographic shifts. The connections between Minnesota and Ohio suggest that these schemes exploit consistent loopholes in social service oversight. By studying past cases, criminal networks may refine methods to maximize gains while minimizing risk. For residents and officials, the repeated nature of these schemes exposes systemic vulnerabilities, insufficient verification processes, limited audits, and delayed inspections. The federal focus aims to identify both structural weaknesses and the players who exploit them, with the goal of disrupting the network. Operation Buckeye's significance extends beyond Ohio. It acts as a warning that similar fraud could occur elsewhere if systemic gaps persist. The investigation emphasizes the need for cross-state cooperation, data sharing, sharing, and real-time monitoring to prevent large-scale abuse of taxpayer-funded services. Immigration and community dynamics. The discussion of Somali immigrants in Ohio highlights the delicate balance between acknowledging law-abiding residents and addressing criminal activity among a small subset. Most immigrants work legitimate jobs in warehouses, transportation, and local businesses, contributing positively to the economy. However, the narrative suggests that a minority exploited this influx to orchestrate fraud. This creates tension. Authorities must pursue criminals while avoiding unfairly stigmatizing entire communities. Historically, fear of political backlash or being labeled culturally insensitive may have slowed investigations. Law enforcement faces a dual responsibility: enforce the law aggressively while protecting innocent individuals from discrimination or retaliation. The dynamics are complex because communities are interconnected and the actions of a few can cast suspicion on the majority. Understanding these cultural and social layers is critical for effective investigation and for rebuilding trust. Additionally, highlighting hardworking immigrants is essential to prevent broad generalizations. This context reinforces that fraud is a systemic problem facilitated by loopholes, not a reflection of a particular community, while showing the human consequences of sweeping assumptions and the need for careful, respectful law enforcement approaches. Exploiting system weaknesses. The alleged fraud highlights how lax oversight creates opportunities for exploitation. Social service programs often operate on a pay-first, verify-later system, trusting agencies to submit accurate claims without immediate checks. Scammers reportedly take advantage by inflating numbers, billing for non-existent services, or creating ghost employees and clients. With infrequent inspections and minimal auditing, public funds can be siphoned away almost undetected. This structure exposes systemic weaknesses, inadequate verification processes, delayed audits, and a lack of real-time monitoring. The story illustrates that even well-intentioned policies can be exploited when accountability is insufficient. Taxpayer money intended to feed children, provide healthcare, or support vulnerable populations becomes vulnerable to theft. The narrative urges policymakers and regulators to strengthen monitoring, implement transparent record-keeping, and conduct surprise inspections. Protecting public resources requires both technological solutions and rigorous human oversight. In essence, this situation is a cautionary tale about how structural inefficiencies, combined with opportunistic behavior, can create a significant drain on social programs and undermine public trust in government systems. The gold rush mentality. The alleged fraud fosters a gold rush mentality, where individuals see quick profits as a way to bypass traditional labor and business models. People new to the country or inexperienced in entrepreneurship reportedly open multiple agencies overnight, recruiting friends and family to participate. Each level of this network benefits financially, turning social service programs into a de facto pyramid scheme. This mentality prioritizes speed and gain over legitimacy or ethical conduct. Beyond personal enrichment, such operations can distort local economies. Untraceable cash raises rents, displaces residents, and fosters economic instability. Neighborhoods experience tension as wealth appears unearned, eroding trust and creating resentment. Social hierarchies shift, rewarding fraudulent behavior over honest work, which undermines community values. The narrative emphasizes that these scams are not isolated incidents. They create ripple effects that influence local housing markets, social cohesion, and public perception of fairness. By framing the scheme as a gold rush, the story underscores both the opportunism and audacity involved, showing how systemic loopholes can have far-reaching human and economic consequences. From daycare to home healthcare fraud, investigations suggest that fraud networks are evolving beyond daycare into home healthcare, targeting Medicaid programs. Agencies allegedly bill for nursing care or therapy that patients never receive, using real individuals' identities to substantiate claims. This expansion demonstrates a sophisticated evolution, indicating adaptability and increasing threat to taxpayer-funded services. Home healthcare fraud is especially concerning because it involves vulnerable populations, such as the elderly, and can compromise both public resources and patient well-being. The narrative shows that criminal networks are learning from past schemes, refining tactics, and escalating operations for higher gains. By leveraging real identities, they reduce the risk of detection and complicate enforcement efforts. The scale of the problem highlights gaps in verification and oversight, emphasizing the need for robust auditing, cross-checking, and real-time monitoring. Fraud in essential services like healthcare can undermine public confidence, compromise care, and strain social systems. The story frames this as a natural progression of criminal ingenuity exploiting systemic weaknesses, emphasizing the urgent need for reform in multiple sectors. Mechanisms of identity-based fraud. Identity-based fraud is central to the schemes described, allowing agencies to bill for services never rendered. Real people, recruited as patients, receive cash kickbacks while agencies collect large sums from the state. This approach exploits bureaucratic trust and human relationships, creating a morally and legally complex situation. Innocent participants may be complicit without fully understanding the consequences, while authorities must distinguish between victims and perpetrators. Identity fraud magnifies the scope of abuse because it relies on existing systems and genuine identities, making detection challenging. It demonstrates both creativity and ruthlessness in exploiting structural loopholes. Furthermore, it raises questions about data protection, regulatory safeguards, and ethical responsibility. This mechanism illustrates how systemic vulnerabilities intersect with human behavior, producing a lucrative yet harmful scheme. The story humanizes the issue by showing that identity theft and exploitation can involve ordinary community members, complicating enforcement and magnifying social consequences beyond mere financial loss. Economic and social impacts on communities. The economic and social repercussions of these alleged frauds extend far beyond financial loss. Neighborhoods experience rising rents as untraceable cash from fraudulent operations flows into local housing markets. Families may be displaced, and community cohesion can weaken under social tension. Crime rates may increase as rival factions compete for control of lucrative networks. Observing others flaunt stolen wealth, residents may feel demoralized, and the value of honest work can appear diminished. The narrative stresses that fraudulent activity destabilizes local economies and erodes public trust in social programs. Beyond immediate monetary theft, these scams generate long-term social costs, altering community dynamics and relationships. Economic distortion and visible wealth disparity can foster resentment, create fear, and challenge the social fabric. By linking fraud to tangible community consequences, the story humanizes the impact, emphasizing that public money is not only a fiscal resource, but a cornerstone of neighborhood stability and social welfare. Shifting law enforcement approach. Historically, law enforcement reportedly hesitated to pursue these schemes due to fears of being accused of cultural insensitivity. Under new directives, authorities are empowered to investigate proactively, leveraging data analytics and advanced monitoring to uncover fraud patterns. The approach now treats large-scale welfare fraud as a serious criminal enterprise rather than minor white-collar offenses. Investigators focus not only on leaders, but also on lower-level operatives who participate in or facilitate the schemes. This proactive stance reflects a strategic shift from reactive auditing to deliberate enforcement designed to deter criminal behavior and recover public funds. By using technology, financial tracing, and targeted investigations, authorities aim to minimize harm to innocent community members while holding wrongdoers accountable. The narrative humanizes enforcement by showing the challenge of balancing law, ethics, and cultural sensitivity while emphasizing the need for rigorous and decisive action to protect taxpayers and prevent further abuse. Total liquidation and asset seizure. Federal prosecutors reportedly use RICO statutes to classify daycare and healthcare fraud as organized criminal enterprises, enabling total asset seizure. Luxury cars, homes, and other assets allegedly purchased with stolen funds are confiscated to reclaim taxpayer money. The goal is not merely arrests, but dismantling the financial structures that allow the schemes to operate. By targeting both top leaders and supporting actors, authorities aim to remove incentives for large-scale fraud. The narrative underscores the severity and scale of enforcement, portraying law enforcement efforts as unprecedented and decisive. Beyond punishment, asset recovery sends a message that fraudulent use of public funds carries tangible consequences. The human impact extends to both perpetrators, who lose wealth and status, and communities, who regain confidence that systems can be corrected and protected. The focus on liquidation emphasizes accountability and deterrence in safeguarding taxpayer-funded programs. Cultural and community repercussions. The crackdown on fraud creates social tension within immigrant communities. Most Somali immigrants are law-abiding and contribute positively to society, but the actions of a few criminal actors can stigmatize the whole community. Individuals who speak out or oppose fraud may face intimidation, complicating enforcement. Law enforcement must carefully differentiate between innocent residents and criminals, balancing cultural respect with justice. The social consequences extend beyond finances. Communities may feel mistrusted, isolated, or unfairly targeted. Maintaining open communication, cultural awareness, and inclusive enforcement strategies is critical to prevent broad stigmatization. By highlighting human repercussions, the narrative emphasizes that fraud is not just a financial crime. It affects social cohesion, trust, and neighborhood dynamics. Protecting public funds while respecting and supporting legitimate communities requires thoughtful, culturally sensitive approaches. Immigration enforcement and policy implications. The story notes that fraud investigations now intertwine with immigration enforcement. Visas and citizenship may be revoked for those engaged in fraudulent schemes. This one-strike approach treats large-scale welfare fraud as a national security concern, deterring exploitation and ensuring public resources are not abused. By targeting immigration status alongside financial penalties, authorities aim to remove incentives for criminal activity while sending a clear message about consequences. This policy framing elevates welfare fraud beyond a simple financial crime, positioning it as a threat to public trust, social integrity, and national stability. The narrative emphasizes deterrence and enforcement as dual tools, showing that preventing fraud requires both legal and policy-level responses to protect taxpayers, social programs, and the broader system from abuse. International money flows and consequences. Funds allegedly stolen from U.S. social services are reported to flow overseas to countries like Kenya and Somalia. This international dimension highlights how local fraud can have global economic consequences. Money intended for American social programs is diverted abroad, reducing resources for communities, schools, and healthcare. Authorities face challenges tracking and reclaiming funds once transferred internationally, emphasizing the limits of domestic enforcement. Cross-border financial flows amplify the stakes, showing that fraud not only steals from taxpayers, but also contributes to systemic economic distortion in multiple regions. The story illustrates the scale and complexity of the issue, demonstrating that public funds can vanish quickly, creating ripple effects locally and internationally. Protecting social programs thus requires vigilance in both domestic oversight and monitoring of international financial flows. Long-term impact on public trust. Beyond immediate financial losses, the widespread fraud erodes public trust in social safety nets. Taxpayers may question whether programs effectively serve their intended purpose, leading to decreased participation and stricter regulatory oversight that can affect legitimate providers. Communities witness visible disparities between wealth and work, fostering resentment and skepticism toward government programs. Rebuilding trust is a long-term challenge, requiring systemic reform, stronger monitoring, and transparent accountability measures. While asset seizures and prosecutions address immediate wrongdoing, restoring faith in institutions is essential for sustaining public services. The narrative emphasizes that vigilance, ethical governance, and careful enforcement are critical to protect taxpayer resources and maintain the social programs meant to support the vulnerable, highlighting that the human and societal cost of fraud extends far beyond dollars lost.